Lynn Haven City Commission and, of course, the public and staff. This workshop is for water and sewer revenue sufficiency study. It will be conducted by a representative from Stantec, and at this point I will turn over to the city manager for an introduction for the workshop, and we thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Today we have Michael Burden. The City Commission actually gave him some directions probably about a year ago to come and do a study for us, he and his team. We've been working for the past couple of years on this rate study. So I'm going to ask Mr. Burden, he is the Vice President of Financial Services for Stantec, to come forward and start his presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is this on?
It is.
It is, okay.
I believe it is. It doesn't really sound.
Now it's on. Okay, great.
And Mr. Neves, I think he may need it a little taller too. And we all try to speak directly into microphones because we have a listening audience at home on live feed, so that helps them to hear as well. So thank you.
Okay,
thank you,
great.
sir.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Commissioners, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. You've been a client of ours, the city, for a number of years, and I just want to tell you how heartbreaking it was to see what you went through with Hurricane Michael. Our hearts and prayers went out to you then, and they still go out to you. I know it's a long recovery. And that's part of what we've been dealing with your utility is the loss of accounts and usage as a result of the hurricane. And, you know, we're trying to, I think we have made pretty good sense of where you are. And fortunately, you do have some reserve balances that are going to help you weather the comeback of some of those accounts. But and I'll get into the presentation in a minute, but I just want to talk to you about it for a second. It's uncertain as to when they'll come back. I mean, we're making our projections in there. So when this is done and you decide what to do, we would recommend at least for the next 2 or 3 years, you look at this each year to see what's happening in terms of the recovery of those accounts and the usage, because that's critical to the plan that we have on the table. The other part of the plan is that I'll see the year when I get in there. I think it's 2021. Chris, is that when we're planning for the stormwater? I think it's 2021. You have contracted with us to do a stormwater rate study, which we're starting on. As soon as this is over, our full attention is going to get to that. And when you adopt that in 2021, $1 million transfer that's going now from the utility to the stormwater fund will go away, and it will be included in the stormwater fee. And that's kind of critical for you to be able to continue with a reasonable rate plan going forward for the water and sewer utility. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I'm going to present to you. So I imagine you still want me to, though. So let's go through what we're doing. This is about Stantec. I mean, this is just to tell you, I don't know if you know much about us. We have Burton and Associates is who we were when we worked for you for many, many years. And about 3.5 years ago, we were acquired by Stantec. So we went from being a 17-person firm to a firm of over 22,000 people. So, but we are the operating financial division of the whole company. And so they kind of left us alone, which is wonderful. So we're operating just as we have before and serving the same clients we served before. There's 300 plus years of experience on our team, on the financial services team. We've done 1.5 million study, 1,500 studies in the last 15 years. We have 30 plus, almost 40 specialists now in our financial services group that are utility specialists. We have 500 utilities in our benchmarking database where if you want to do some benchmarking, we can compare you to other utilities. We've served over 275 communities, and we've issued financial feasibility support studies in support of the issuance of over $1 billion worth of debt. So we've been doing this. It's what we specialize in. So I think you have the right folks doing this. In 2017, the city conducted a rate study with us, but at the time, no action was taken on the findings of the study with regard to the rate revenue adjustments or the rate structure changes. The previous study recommended rate revenue increases of 4.5% per annum for both water and sewer rates over the 10-year projection period of the study. Given the impacts of Hurricane Michael in 2018, you engaged us again in July of this year to review the sufficiency of the revenues considering the major loss of accounts as well as the repair and rebuilding efforts that have had to take place and will continue to take place. This evening, I'm going to present the results of that study to you. The key cost requirements are O&M expenses. They're based upon the 2019 adopted budget, and future fiscal years are forecasted based upon cost inflation factors. We had interactive work sessions with your staff, and we looked at what are the inflation factors going to be for personnel, for chemicals, for insurance, for each one has a different inflation factor. So we feel pretty good about our looking forward expenses. They include the transfer to the stormwater utility for the payment of debt service of approximately $1 million annually through 2020. But in 2021, we're assuming that will go away because you will adopt a stormwater rate that will include that debt service and the stormwater fee at that point in time. Debt service on the outstanding bonds includes a final balloon payment of the Series 2011 capital improvement bond, resulting in increased debt service. Well, that doesn't make sense. Well, there's a large drop in that cost in the years following when that sunsets, okay? I'm not sure the first part of that is actually right. The capital improvement plan, or the CIP, I guess Panhandle Engineering has basically put that together, and in counseling with them and your city staff, we came up with a final CIP. We had to move projects around a little bit based upon the new timing because we had the old CIP before the hurricane. And so we worked very closely with Chris on figuring out where those projects needed to be and what still needs to be done. And they're going to be funded primarily using cash and or state revolving fund loans if you have to issue debt, which you will. The major CIP projects include AMI installation, upgrades at the existing wastewater treatment plant, and various upgrades and improvements to wastewater collection and interceptor interceptor system. I know Chris is here tonight, and after my presentation, if you have more questions about that, I'm sure he can elucidate any questions you may have about that. The utility in the loss of active meters, and as you see on the graph over there, from best we can tell, in September of 18, you had about 8,833 active meters, and in FY 2019, you have 7,586. That's a loss of about 1,247 meters, or active accounts, if you will, or about a 14.2% reduction in your active accounts. The loss of the active meters is projected to impair the utility's revenues in 2019 and will continue to do so until those meters are reactivated. The revenue sufficiency analysis assumes that there will be a recovery of impaired accounts, and there'll be additional new growth in addition to that that you would have just as you would as a community who had not even been in the hurricane. And so what we did is we developed two components. I don't know if this has a little, yeah, there we go. New development starting in 2020, we're assuming about 150 units a year. And then on account recovery, based upon discussion with staff, it looks like there's some things underway that will cause you to maybe recover a little over 200 counts a year in 2020 and 2021. There was some discussion about the fact that they may all happen in 2020, but to be conservative, we just said, okay, you know, things usually don't happen as projected, so let's just assume they happen over those 2 years. And then we have 50 accounts per year through the remainder of the forecast period that will be coming back that were accounts before, not new growth, but they were already accounts before. And then our revenue projections, these accounts here would pay impact fees and these will not. So we're not projecting impact fee revenue on the accounts that are just basically being recovered. So a total growth is pretty healthy for your system, is the bottom line right there, about 200 units a year overall after you get past the first 2 years where you're getting a significant slug of recovery of your units that were damaged in the hurricane. This is our control panel, and what this is kind of a diagnostic projection. It's like you don't feel very good, you go to the doctor, he does an MRI, and he tells you what's wrong. Okay, and this is if you didn't do any rate increases going forward. There's no rate revenue adjustments assumed. It impairs your ability to borrow money because that debt service reserve for the subordinate debt, which is the SRF debt, is it has to be at least 1.0 or 1.25, and it's not adequate. In addition to that, the negative cash flow that you see in this, where the cash out is the red bar and the cash in is the green, that delta has to be made up out of reserve balances. I mean, it's much like managing your household income. You can spend more money than you make as long as you have a savings account, but you got to make it up out of that. This is not feasible. This MRI says that you're going to run out of money in this year. So how deep that gets is inconsequential. It just kind of shows you the gravity of the situation if you didn't do a rate increase. These things, these won't change. The capital spending, those bars are going to stay the same in each scenario I'm going to show you. And I'm going to get to a good solution, so don't worry about it. And the CIP funding will change a little bit. There's a significant amount of borrowing here in this. All the red is borrowing. And these are the issues that would be the bond issues that would be issued for that borrowing. But this is a stack chart that shows how much comes from cash and borrowing and other resources. Now, this is the scenario if you did not, for whatever reason, if you don't do a stormwater, if you decided, no, we're going to leave the stormwater as it is, we're going to keep that $1 million transfer in. If you did that, you'd need 8% increases each year going forward in order for your cash in and cash out lines to be coincident with each other, which is what has to happen. And that will preserve your reserve balances right over here in the upper left-hand graph. The black bar is the minimum target. And I believe, do you remember what it is? I believe we have 6 months of O&M expense in there. I believe it's 6 months of O&M expense is the target balance. So this is a good viable plan. Your debt service coverage is compromised in 2019 and 20, but there's really nothing much we can do about that. But it comes back very quickly once you start getting into 2021. So we believe this is a good viable plan if you did not do a stormwater system, a stormwater rate. However, I've been talking over all these already. This is the scenario if you do implement the stormwater rate and you eliminate the $1 million transfer out of this fund to the stormwater fund. You could continue with 4.5% rate increases, which what the last recommendation was, by the way, when we were here before. And you would have a balance, you would have adequate fund balance in each year. Your cash in and cash out are consistent. Your revenue, your debt service coverage is very good. It's well over 1.25 throughout the whole forecast period, but you will have to do some significant borrowing. Now we're showing the borrowing happening in each year. It'll probably in actuality, it would bundle up in 2-year increments or something of that nature. And it may be a little bit more efficient because it's going to be SRF borrowing, and the SRF borrowing, the debt service has a lag of a year or two, and we're just assuming the debt service comes in on the year of the borrowing here. So we're being overly conservative on this, but we believe this is a good balanced plan, and it will ultimately be our recommendation to you, which I'll get to in just a moment. We looked at one other scenario. Okay, where am I going? And this scenario is if you purchased the North Bay system, okay, which was in our scope before. It doesn't do much, quite frankly. You can't really hardly see it on here, but it's a little bit less borrowing that you would need because you do have more revenues coming in from the customers of that system, and you do have some additional O&M costs, but it's not so much to make a difference in the plan. Theoretically, if you wanted to have those bars slightly higher like they were in the last scenario, you could maybe take that rate increase down to 4.25% when and if you acquire that system, but it's not a material impact to your system, I guess is the takeaway today. And I don't think you need to consider it right now in terms of your decision for what to do over the next few years. That can be considered further when you get recovered from this hurricane and are closer to actually maybe doing something about that. So our findings and recommendations are that the 4.5% annual revenue adjustment will provide adequate resources for the utilities, assuming that the stormwater rate is adjusted in 2021 to include the amount that is currently being transferred from the water and sewer fund. We recommend that the city adjust the revenues by 4.5% on October 1 of each year for a minimum of 3 years beginning on October 1 of 2019, this coming up October. We also recommend that you take advantage of the SRF, the State Revolving Fund Loan Program, to fund the planned capital investments to the extent that you can. And given the uncertainty related to hurricane recovery efforts, the city should reevaluate this analysis each year for at least 3 years to ensure that the projected rate increases are sufficient to meet the utilities requirements, as a recovery of loss counts may or may not occur as projected. And that's it. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I'd be happy to go back to any charts if you'd like to look at them again, or if you have questions of me or Chris, maybe about the CIP, we're both available to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burton. Does anyone from the commission have a question for Mr. Burton at this time?
Yes, Mayor, I do.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Aldridge.
I see we have the 10-year plan there. What basis did you use for your population numbers throughout the 10 years? I mean, did we keep it static based on it looks like now?
We're actually looking at growth in accounts. And I guess you have a correlation between accounts and population.
Mm-hmm.
But on the chart I showed you where it was accounts based upon new growth of 250
Right.
and on recovery of the lost accounts, and it ends up being about 300, I think, a year. Let me go back to that slide.
What were the gains based on, I guess? Was it just
It was no, just a second, I'll tell you. There it is. This is counseling with staff and looking historically at what kind of growth you've had and what's in the pipeline and how much area you have. And then, so it's not an exact science.
Right.
We normally, I mean, and there have been occasions where we go back and get Bieber population projections and all that, but those are done for different reasons, not necessarily for utility projections of revenues. And we found that it's really better to counsel with the utility, look at the historical growth in the utility in terms of accounts, and use that as a basis for the growth. So that's new, 150 a year, and this is recovery, 211, and 20 and 21, and then 50 a year for 361, and 20 and 21, and then 200 a year thereafter.
Sure. So. And the reason I asked the question, of course, is we're, most projections for our area, I mean, we're a desirable place to move. So yes. I believe there will be significant population increases over the next 10 years, which will help offset some of these costs, which we can revisit. But I just wanted to know how you got those.
Well, you're probably numbers. Right. And the beautiful thing about doing it the way we have right here is as you look at this, I would say for the first 3 years, you ought to do it every year and then maybe every other year after that. If growth occurs more aggressively than we have projected, you can make adjustments. You can lower your rate increase, reduce your borrowing, whatever, and you can see what those happen as they occur.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
May I ask a question, Mr. Burton?
Yes.
I wanted to just sort of project in dollars and cents for our households. Am I thinking correctly that it would be somewhere around $3 to $3.50 per household per water and sewage bill per month if we were to put this 4.5 rate increase into effect? Is that?
Mayor, I don't have that on this chart.
I was thinking I saw a dollars and cents at the bottom. It was right there with where it says average bill at the bottom.
You did.
Yeah. Just want to make sure I was reading it correctly.
That's the plan. Yeah, the current bill for water and sewer using 5,000 gallons is $63.99. It would go to $64.82. Can you read that too?
Yes. And then in 2021, it would be they would be looking at an increase of another $3. So it looks like basically around $3 or a little more each month per household.
Yeah.
So if they were looking at $63.99 right now, then by the year 2029, if we continue to do that every year, they would be looking at a water bill of about $99.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
about a $30 increase over a 10-year period per household. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's correct. Let me tell you something too that's not on this chart, but I will tell you, we all think of the CPI, it's a 1.5% to 2.5% escalation factor. That's made up of a number of indices, one of which is over 200 indices. I think one of which is called the Water and Sewerage Maintenance Index.
Yes.
And it's a measure of the increase in the water and sewer bill of a single family home using 5,000 gallons of water.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been keeping it for 30 years, and it's over the whole entire United States. If you look at the average for the last 10 years, it's about 5%. In the last couple of years, it's down a little bit more, like around 4%. So you're not out of line in terms of a national experience that utilities are having. You have a very different basket of goods than a normal CPI has. You have aging infrastructure that you have to have renewal and replacement on. You have regulatory requirements, not only requiring you to spend capital dollars, but also O&M dollars in terms of certificated operators, minimum hours, and things of that nature. So, and you have significant O&M expenses in terms of chemicals and things of that nature. So you're at 4.5%, you're probably pretty much right in the average of what you would see nationally over the last several years.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission? Any questions from the commission for Chris Forehand with Panhandle Engineering about the SIP plan? Okay, are there any questions from the public for Mr. Burton? Anybody from the public would like to ask? Mr. Robitaille, you could just stand in place or sit in place if you prefer. It's a very informal workshop, sir.
Will you give us a year-by-year increase that you've recommended? It seems to me every time I see you, it goes up 4 or 5%. What's your history of recommendations?
Well, around the state, all utilities are facing the same pressure for increases in their rates. First off, if you look at operations and maintenance expense, that's that dotted line right there. Every business, there's an inexorable slope to your operation and maintenance expenses. You have increases in the utilities and in commodities and in pay that you have to pay your employees. So you can't avoid that. And your utility has to deal with aging infrastructure and also capital expansion requirements. And so when you add that to it, you come up, if you just looked at O&M alone, maybe it would not be as significant as it is with the capital in there, but it would still be in the neighborhood of 3 to 4% probably. So I would say around the state with all our clients, we're looking at utilities that are ranging on increases. We have almost no utilities that can go with no rate increase going forward because of that inexorable slope to the cost curve. And depending upon whether they have spent a lot of money on renewal and replacement in the past and don't have as much to do now, or they got a big backlog of that, they may have anywhere from 3.5 to 6.5 or 7% for a period of time. Most of the utilities, if they have a bigger rate increase for the first 2 or 3 years of our forecast, they will come back to something around 4 to 4.5% in the out years.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Mr. Robitaille?
Not at all.
Okay, you want to?
Not at all. What I'd like to know is, let's go back 10 years, okay? In that 10-year period, has there ever been 1 year where you have not recommended a rate increase? And if so, if you have, what is the average you recommended each year?
You mean for you or for any utility? For
the city of Lynn Haven or for just the state in general is what he's asking.
For the city of Lynn Haven or any of my clients?
Right here.
Right
For
here.
Lynn Haven.
I don't.
You may not have that information.
I don't have that information, and I can only rely on the answer I gave
Sure.
you that you have that pressure. And what was there in the last 10 years? A year where maybe you got kind of ahead of the game and could have done a lower rate increase? Maybe there was. I don't recall, but I do know that you like all other utilities are facing that slope.
Thank
on that
you.
cost curve.
Mr. Walker, I think you had a question. Did you raise your hand or did I not see you? Okay, go ahead.
Did you get your answer? Yes, it's a real nice chart.
Okay, Mr. Walker.
According to back 10 years, I was under the impression that the enterprise funds, which this is, are key to the CPI. And it reads that you can't go higher than 3% over the years. And that, to answer your question, over the 10 years that I've noticed it, we've always been either at CPI or we've never had to do I'll give it a cliche, manual upgrade. So with that is number 1 point. Number 2 point is it is an enterprise fund. And for the last 10 years, we've noticed, the city managers have noticed, the enterprise funds make money. And you've been transferring the profit from the enterprise funds to the general fund.
Okay, I would correct you on that, Mr. Walker, but please continue. Go ahead. I totally disagree with what you just said. Go ahead.
Ceased when Mr. Schubert came into effect, and he decided that it wasn't nice to transfer things out of the enterprise funds who needed help sometimes and put it in a general fund. So he stopped that. Just last year, it was restarted again. So my question is this: if the enterprise funds make money and they're making a profit, and we've been staying underneath the GPI, why do we have to give an increase if this thing is making a profit?
And Mr. Walker, if I could make one more correction to what you said, you can certainly feel free to disagree with me. But the reason that money was borrowed from the enterprise funds last year in 2018 was because of the expenses from Hurricane Michael, and we needed cash flow at that point. the plan is by September 30th that we'll be replacing all of those funds with a FEMA reimbursement money. So that's going to be a wash. That money is going to come back into those accounts. There was just no other cash to use at that time. So that's why they were borrowed from. You know what my position's been from the time I've been mayor about moving anything from enterprise funds. So I do take issue with saying that we move them because they were used to pay immediate debris hauling bills to clean up the city in the days following the storm. But they will be replaced by September 30th of this year. So.
I didn't mean to imply last year. Last year was.
Well, that's 2018.
That was a different procedure.
Okay. Okay.
However, my original thing is, for the years that I've watched it, we have made profit on the enterprise.
Yes, we have, and Lynn Haven was in great shape. Yes.
Exactly. So if you're making profit on the enterprise funds, why are we looking at putting more of a problem onto our citizens by increasing?
And we're not necessarily looking at doing that. I'm not sure what any of the commissioners' opinion is going to be about this. I know what mine is, and this is a rate study. Mr. Burton is simply the messenger from the study, giving us the information that the study showed, and it will be up to this commission based on what their residents tell them where they go with that. So no decision has been made. This is just information.
Madam Mayor, may I respond?
Of course you may.
Yeah. First off, every utility that I know of in the state, every government-owned utility transfers money to the general fund for the services that they benefit from that the general fund provides. Personnel, accounting, whatever. So there's always that kind of a transfer to the general fund, because otherwise the utility would have to have all those resources within their own enterprise fund, and they don't. So that's a normal thing to happen. The utility has had a transfer in addition to the stormwater fund over, I don't know how long that's happened, but so one could say, is that a profit that they're using to fund the stormwater system? It's a water resource, okay? It's not, I don't think, a problem. It's not like you're funding a general fund activity with it. So is the apportionment as fair as it would be with a stormwater rate study? Maybe not, but I don't think it's a fatal flaw to make that kind of a transfer to another water resource like stormwater. So you're going to fix that with a stormwater rate study, and we're going to get a fair and equitable stormwater study. There will be, if you look here, if we were making a profit, those reserve balances would be building up, okay? And we're having to borrow money too. So there's no way this utility is making excess revenue that you can consider a profit in any way, shape, or form. And that's just the truth of it. So
I think if I can put words into Mr. Walker's mouth, I think what he was saying is that our enterprise funds have become healthy, that they were thriving over the past years, not necessarily a profit. They were just healthier than they had been, is what he meant, I believe.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Okay. That's what I interpreted you to mean.
The healthy means that you're making money in this one and you're giving it to the general fund. Why do you want to take it away and make an increase on us more labor?
And I would also say that in certain issues, for example, a bond issue, you cannot use ad valorem taxes to pay back a bond, and at least in the case. And so there are different times when the city's called on to use the funds that we have. So
yes.
Mr. Robitaille, yes, go ahead, please.
I apologize. I didn't mean to be insulting, but I think this commission, this board, ought to have people. He does raise our price every year. I would like to bring someone here that could show us how to save. I'm right there with Mr. Walker. Every year it just goes up and up. When we get a new evaluation, we get a new study, and it goes up and up and up. Let's try to get a consultant in here that will show us how to save a few dollars and reduce my water.
And maybe a financial consultant for the city. Thank you, Mr. Robitaille. Now, are there any other questions from the public? Well, I believe that we're finished then,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
And we appreciate your time, Mr. Burton, and a very detailed study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you going to, I need to stay for the meeting? Is there, you going to take action or anything or consider? So am I done?
You're free to go, or you can stay for the meeting if you like.
Okay. When does the meeting start?
4 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burton. Safe travels. And it's only 3:32 at this time, and so we'll take a short recess until 4 o'clock. Thank you all for being here for the workshop.